Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Bradley Jackson with Startup Talk on Cal State Fullerton Titan Radio. We are here today to talk startups and entrepreneurship, the problems, the issues associated with starting up a company. And by the way, a startup is a company who's trying to figure out who its customer is, what their problem is, and how they might help them. A company is a bit more advanced in that they've figured out, well, I think I know who the customer is. They understand the problems, and in fact, they have a solution that they're going to market with, and the hope is it's going to make money and prosper. So there is a difference between a startup and a company. So we're broadcasting live, and I welcome you all. This will also be recorded on podcast for future use. The Cal State Fullerton Center for Entrepreneurship will push that podcast out, and you'll be able to listen to it at a later time and forward it to others. I'm your host. I get called JJ a lot, John Bradley Jackson, and I teach entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton. I direct the entrepreneurship efforts, the Center for Entrepreneurship, as well as our two startup incubators. I'm an angel investor and co-founded Titan Angels, a seed investment company. And my background is I come from Silicon Valley. Did a tour on Wall Street where I learned about greed with a capital G. And this is kind of my third career here at the university, and my hope is to inspire our students and our alums to try to go out there and look to solve problems, break things, and see if they can't make the planet better. So you can follow us on the Fullerton website, www.fullerton.edu. Or my website, johnbradleyjackson.com, and then the Entrepreneurship Center you'll find on all the major social tools as well as me. By the way, Titan Radio is the official radio station for Cal State Fullerton. We have over 70 student and faculty on-air personalities, and it's been around since about 2001. We broadcast 24/7. And encourage you to get engaged. Our guest today is franchising and startup expert Michael Sawitz, a longtime friend of mine, and it's my pleasure to welcome Michael to the show. One thing, just to set the table, it's stunning how huge the franchising industry is. A recent stat that I saw is that there are 800,000 franchise businesses in the U.S. scattered out over 120 different industries, employing over 9 million, almost 10 million people. How about that? So, Michael, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Hey, JJ, great to be here.
Yeah. So, for our audience, I think we have a few people in the category who think, well, I've got a company that's in place and doing well, or maybe even I have a early stage startup. Should I consider franchising? And then the other question I get an awful lot is for the aspiring business person, someone who's leaving campus to go to work, is should they consider getting a franchise themselves? So this is a really broad subject, but I was wondering if we could talk about your experience with franchising as a founder, a franchisor, and today as an advisor to folks on franchising.
Great. So let's go back to the start, I guess. I never started out to be a franchisor. The competitive marketplace sort of pushed us that way. Way back when, in 1985, I had transitioned careers. So career number one was in the apparel industry with some surf companies and active apparel. And it was wonderful, but I was gone all the time. And wife at home said, we need a husband and a father more than we need the money. I had been successful, so it was kind of hard to walk away in my mid-30s, but priorities. My wife and my kids are much more important than my career. So here we were. We started all over again and started a small store in Mission Viejo. And second year opened another store. Third year opened another store. Fourth year threw our hat in the ring as a franchisor and decided to share our concept with others. So, that brought us to, 88, 89 and became a franchisor and ran that company for nearly 30 years and had 124 franchisees in 20-plus states and had a wonderful time and did some really good work, and it came time to exit. And so when I sold my company, I thought I was done with franchising, but no, it's one of those things that keep clawing you back. So the first thing that happened is I was offered a position with the California Bar Association's Committee on Franchise and Distribution Law, which is kind of an interesting thing. Do I have a moment to go into what that is? It sounds kind of convoluted, but the California Supreme Court, in their wisdom, thought that there were different types of law that took speciality. The first one was maritime law. How many attorneys really know how to deal with maritime law? And then came family law and bankruptcy law, and as you can see, very specialized parts of law. And along came this thing called franchising and distribution law, which again is very different from just transactional or contract law. And so they created advisory councils. And I've been sitting on that advisory council now for 5 years, five and a half years. And it's kind of a weird thing. Have a small room full of 7 attorneys and myself, and some days I want to just choke myself to death because it gets really, really boring. But I'm there to represent the people of the state of California as an operator. So the attorneys don't make all kinds of laws, rules, and regs that are contrary to running a good business. So I've been doing that for 5 years, and it's an interesting gig. So I'm a commissioner. It's kind of fun. Now I make my kids call me the commish or commissioner. So, just kidding on that, but my friends do. It's kind of a gig. So been doing it for the people of California for 5.5 years, and more recently, just short of 2 years ago, I got drafted here at the Cal State Fullerton Small Business Development Center, which is an outreach of the Small Business Administration, or SBA. And for that, I was brought in as the franchise guy. So I work with people who are looking to buy an individual franchise, that's their path, their way of getting into business, into commerce, and it's really fun, and it puts me right in the middle of a whole bunch of different franchises that I never worked with, had no concept really of. In fact, right now, one of them is a lash. So I am blown away by the amount of money that the typical, especially Southern California woman pays on having her lashes extended.
Oh my gosh!
You've got great eyelashes, JJ. So
you
wouldn't need to go into a lash parlor, but they are booming, and looking at purchasing, helping her purchase a franchise for that. And on the other side, existing businesses that have made it through the startup phase and the prototyping and have solid businesses, and they want to use franchising as a growth vehicle, and have fewer of those, but it's certainly the two ends of the spectrum. So franchising for the SBA, franchising for the state of California, and a recovering franchisor.
Very good. So I'd like to go back to the early days of your startup. Was it known as AIM Mail Center, by the way?
Yeah, we started out as American Postal Center.
Okay.
And great graphics. The store was very attractive. When I went to franchise, I needed to protect the name, not just here in California, but nationally, and found out that I could not trademark American Postal Center. The Fed said it was too generic, so I needed to come up with a new acronym.
Yeah, important decision. So it was a startup. You didn't acquire a business?
Nope. Started right from the beginning. Took all the risks that every startup does.
And what was the problem that you were solving at that time?
At that time, there were several problems. Ultimately, we had 26 profit centers, so we were solving problems in 26 different areas. So the first was the lack of mailbox rentals. You could go to the post office, but they were full up. And a lot of businesses, a lot of individuals need an alternative mailbox, especially generations that tend to move a lot. You know, if you move every year or every other year and move in with friends, or you don't want to buy a home and you go from apartment to apartment, having your mail catch up with you is difficult. So taking a permanent sort of mailbox rental with the post office was a good thing, is a good thing, but there weren't enough. So that started the sort of public mailbox solution.
So your customer was B2C, but also B2B. Is that
right?
Correct?
So that was my claim to fame, and what we did in our franchise. We were the first to really push into the B2B space. It was easy for me to go that way. We saw the consumer, the B2C person, 4 or 5 times a year, for tax day, making copies and so forth. Mother's Day is that gilt box of chocolate that gets sent cross-country to mom because you haven't seen her or called her, or of course, Christmas shipping and so forth. But our B2B customer, we saw on an average of 29 times a year, and their average spend was higher, and the products and services they bought were the things that we had better margin. So you do the math. It's very easy to fall in love with the B2B customer. Plus, I was a small business owner. I could relate. And so that's what we went after, and that helped to fuel our growth.
So the competitive, you said this was 85?
Yes, started in 85, franchised in 89.
Right. Were there others? For instance, I think of Kinko's,
sure,
mailboxes, etc.
Right.
That came later, I believe.
Well, Mailbox, etc. actually started a few years before us, but they went in with private equity money and did very well, built to 5,000 stores when they were acquired by UPS when UPS went public. So, yeah, it was more than an 800-pound gorilla in the room. We were fighting UPS, an $80 billion company.
Yeah, so the brilliance of what you did is you entered a market that was real, it's established, but maybe there were some overlooked segments that
Right.
weren't getting the service or the products that they needed.
That's it, and that's where the small operator will always beat the big operator by being more nimble and being more open to the needs of their customer. And that's simply Startup 101. Find out what people want and just find a way to give it to them. It's not about you; it's about them.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about you.
That's a great subject. Let's do that.
You as, you're the startup founder, and the questions I get is, who are the people that are successful startup founders? Many aspire to be such, but there's a smaller list who actually are able to do it. So let's go back in time. So tell me about growing up. Now, you were back in New York, is that correct?
No, I worked in New York, my apparel career. So I had an office in New York in the Empire State Building. I had an office in Dallas in the Dallas Apparel Mart and one in downtown LA. So I just moved between those three and, of course, visiting my customers, all over the country. I grew up in the Pomona Valley, wound up going to Mount Sac and Cal Poly Pomona for a while before I dropped out to open my first store. That was kind of a lucky fluke.
Now wasn't your dad had a haberdashery? Is that correct?
No, but he came. That was the New York connection.
Okay,
He grew up in New York, so okay. I worked in a haberdashery.
Okay.
Proper men's apparel, which was kind of funny for a guy that had long hair and a beard at the time. But I learned well, and was offered a small ownership, a partnership with some movie stars, actually, at the time. The highest paid actor in Hollywood was Bill Bixby. He ultimately became the first Incredible Hulk, but before that, it was a show called The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which gave him the highest paid status of any actor in Hollywood. And there were other people from, like, Laugh-In. Do you remember that program?
Very much.
Yeah. So that's where Goldie Hawn came from, and her partner there was I just went blank. But her partner in that skit, if you will, was one of our partners, and so a few other actors came in. They put up the money. I had retail experience from the clothing store, so that was my thing, and I opened a pilot store in San Bernardino. And meanwhile, Bill Bixby would go on Johnny Carson or Merv Griffin, all the talk shows at night, and people wanted to buy these franchises, and I had no clue what a franchise was back there anyhow. I was just having fun, in the whole hippie clothes thing, and it was fun.
Yeah. Let's dial back. So you grew up in Southern California.
Yes.
And
mm-hmm.
I was wrong about the New York connection.
That's my New York accent, I guess,
yeah.
Or my New York point of view, as Billy Joel would say.
Yeah. So in high school, were there any indicators that you might be entrepreneurial, that you would do startups, or what were you like?
No, I was an athlete and a bit of a nerd. When I went into college, I went in as pre-med, but I was actually studying to be a marine zoologist, believe it or not. And 3 years into it, found out that really it was a great calling, but you couldn't make a living at it. So business sounded like the quick trip, and so I quickly switched to a business major.
All right, very cool. And then your mom and dad, were they supportive of all these different efforts on your part?
They kind of got out of the way, so I call that extremely supportive. Always kind of marched to a different beat. The Vietnam War was going on at one time. I knew I was going to get drafted. Everybody in my high school that I knew, everybody on the teams that I played on, were getting drafted. So. And then I got called up to take my physical, so I knew it wasn't long before I'd go off to Vietnam. And so I packed my bags, said goodbye to everybody, and took off for Hawaii. I figured I wanted to live a little before I had a chance of dying, since I had friends that had already come back in body bags. So I spent several months bumming around the Hawaiian Islands, sort of finding out who I was, and realized that I needed to come back. And yes, I came back, and there was that number 10 envelope from the United States government, and I knew it was going to say greetings, which everybody was getting those, and what day to report for active duty. But mine said, we regret to inform you, you are unfit for military duty. I had hurt my back playing football, and man, it saved my life.
So you had a 1Y designation?
So a 4F.
4F, oh my
goodness. I went from 1A, well, first had student,
yeah.
Then they did away with all the student deferments, and so I got reclassified 1A and knew I was going, but had no clue that my back would get me out. So that saved my life.
That's incredible. And that, your story about the Vietnam cloud that hung over 60s generation people is so real. And I know our younger listeners read about this in history books, but it absolutely challenged the young men and women of the day to make some really tough choices personally, professionally, etc. And what a turbulent time it was. As I reflect, you were talking the long hair and the beard, and I'm just a little bit younger than you, and so I missed most of it, but I caught up in the 70s.
There you go. Well, it was a little different. I mean, now we see, various strife going on with Afghanistan, the Middle East, wherever, and, it's nightly news or it's your whatever favorite social media platform, however you get your news. This was a different time. This affected everybody. How do you make a decision to go to school or get a job or get married or any of those other sort of acceptable and accepted paths when you didn't know if you were going to get called up? And I don't know if you remember, but they went to a lottery, a number system, and they were taking so many people. Everybody got assigned a number based on your birthday, and they did a lottery, and the next 50 or 80 or 100,000 would go in based on certain birthdays, and then the next month they would do it again and again, and so you'd be virtually assured that eventually you were going to go in. And so how do you make decisions when sort of that's in your face? It is something that luckily today's generations and the generation in between has not had to face that. But, that was one of the things that we had to carry is we were involved in sort of, the current, war effort, whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah, in fact, my lottery number was 258.
Oh, great number, great number.
And I was at the tail end of the lottery, and then they discontinued it. So that's my comment about just kind of missing the window.
There you go. Well, I never won anything in any drawing. Couldn't win a bicycle. I couldn't win anything when there was a lottery. So I knew I was going to get a bad number, and so that was the deal.
Very cool. So I'd like to flip it back to franchising, and for our listeners. In a few words, could you basically describe what franchising means?
Sure. Franchising is a business model, right? It's a way of building business, and it's a symbiotic relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor, that together they're working to build wealth, if you will, for the company. And the franchisee gets the lion's share, and the franchisor gets a royalty for support, creating a system, developing product, and so forth, of doing the heavy lifting that the franchisee doesn't have to. It's sort of like the franchisor has built this box, bunch of gears and levers and magic stuff inside, and on one side is a lever, and on the other side is a spigot. And what the franchisor wants is for a franchisee to grab a hold of that lever or that crank and just turn it as fast as they can, because out of the spigot side comes cash. And it only works if they're both doing their part. But it works really, really well. In fact, I think, everybody kind of understands franchising American style, but franchising has gone way beyond, the bounds of the United States. In fact, it's had incredible impact in developing countries. So let's say you're in Indonesia, and to grow the country of Indonesia. It's difficult. There's 1,700 individual islands with about 1,700 different dialects. So even the people in Indonesia don't really communicate well. And how do you build industry? And so there's really two ways. One way is to send your young people off to go to universities in America or England and learn and come back and help start businesses and grow business in your own country. Or, and this is what's happened, is to buy into a franchise system and get that technology as part of the package. So in Indonesia, that's why I picked Indonesia, the government created a 50 square block enterprise zone in Jakarta.
My goodness. Yeah.
So they waived all kinds of fees. Back when they did it, it was almost impossible to get a telephone line. So they made it in that 50 square blocks, they made sure that the support services were there and made it easy for their population to buy into American or other franchises, because not just to sell and to sort of raise the GNP, but to teach their population these new technologies and then to leverage off of that in their own startups, if you will. So it's happened over and over again that franchising has been pivotal with developing countries. I mean, even superpowers like Russia, my own take on it is, yes, we give Ronald Reagan tremendous credit for bringing down, the Berlin Wall, but more importantly, to ending the Cold War. But the underpinning, in my mind, was Coca-Cola and Levi. All right?
Heading into Russia.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
So why Coca-Cola and Levi? Well, Levi jeans were the hottest thing going, and that's American enterprise. And the Russian underground were, going on vacation to Germany or France or England, buying American products, especially Levi, and bringing them back and reselling them on, in the Russian black market, along with music and Levi's. The other side of it was franchising. So McDonald's opened a McDonald's in Red Square, and for many years it was the highest grossing franchise in the McDonald's system. But how they did that is the important story. So, everybody, not everybody, but most everybody is in love with McDonald's French fries. For one, I claim my rights to the tons that I've already eaten in my lifetime. But the thing about a McDonald's franchise or French fry is the same as any of their products. It's total consistency. The French fry you get in Red Square is the same that you're going to get in Fullerton. And to do that, they brought a special seed to farmers in the Ukraine, and they taught them how to grow that specific potato well before they opened. They also went to cattle ranchers in Russia and showed them the type of beef they wanted raised and how it was to be slaughtered and processed so that the hamburger would be the same anywhere. And that's the essence of what a franchise is, that absolute total consistency of product and service. And because of that success and letting Russians see there was a different way of providing products and services, there was just a difference, kind of was the chink in the armor, and helped to bring down the Russian oligarchy.
Yeah, it's interesting you tell the story about Russia. So about 20 years ago, my wife and I spent collectively about 8 weeks in Ukraine. In fact, in downtown
Kyiv,
or Kyiv, as they like to say, right? And when you're away for that length of time, you start to miss some of the familiar things. And we went to the downtown McDonald's, which was huge. I mean, I kid you not, it was about 5,000 square feet. and it was like a hangout for the young hip crowd, all dressed in black, drinking coffee and eating French fries, by the way. And you go up to the counter, and as I recall, the menu was in dual language, but there it was, Big Mac, right? And it was fundamentally the same product that I could get in Fullerton. It just blew me away.
Yeah, I've had the same experience outside of Shanghai and Ningbo. We'd been there, my son and I, with his startup, and again, craving some food that approximated what we were used to, since we were eating a ton of strange stuff in China, strange for us. And that was just a really great respite to have lunch in a McDonald's and then go back to work, sort of revitalized.
Yeah, but I totally get your point, is that a key to franchising success is consistency in the franchise. And we're going to address that. But I'd like so you're running a small company. You have a successful startup that is now a company, and your channel of distribution includes a multi-unit approach. So you've got a pivot there. Decision is, do you build them yourself? Do you run them yourself? Or should you consider franchising? So what is the tipping point, do you think, between company-owned stores and franchising?
So on the operations side, there is no difference. It's the same thing, whether you're opening those units yourself or you're using the franchise model. Operations has to be standardized, has to be formulated so that you do, if you want an A, you do 2 of these, 1 of those, and a pinch of that every single time, and you get the same outcome. It's called planned outcome, right? So you have to do that in order to expand yourself. And the difference in franchising is you've done that, and now you've licensed someone that does not work for you, because that's not the relationship. That you've licensed someone to faithfully, and that's a big deal right there, faithfully use that system to grow the brand. So from an operations standpoint, it's exactly the same. From the finance side, there's a big difference, right? So franchising is in essence growing with other people's money, the franchisee's money. Or the franchisee has borrowed from the SBA or from, Uncle Bob and Aunt Martha, but it's not the franchisor's money that's fueling the growth. Versus doing it yourself, you have to make sure that, the financial model is there and that you've got the resources to grow. So that's a big deal. And for me, the biggest deal of all is the mindset. It's a control issue. Right? You can tell your employees what to do, and if they don't do it, you fire them. All right, that's one of the remedies. In franchising, not so easy. So it is about being able to motivate. It's being able to support a diverse group of people and form some kind of culture where the brand is more important than anyone's individual efforts. You can do that, you can conquer the world. So it's a mindset. Not all business people have a mindset that lends itself to franchising.
So for the franchisor, qualifying, selecting, partnering with the franchisee is a pretty big decision.
It's huge. So big companies use psychologists. I tried that. Hired a firm out of Canada, a bunch of PhDs, and they put together testing models so that I could find people that psychically or spiritually or emotionally, their emotional IQ, if you will, was in line with what we were trying to do in our growth pattern. That failed. That crystal ball wasn't working at all. So it's really a difficult situation. In fact, I struggled with it for years because I'm going, hey, I signed this contract saying I'm going to give you this, this, and this. I've committed to my support. You've signed the contract saying you will faithfully follow the system, and now you're not, so what gives? And it would drive me crazy. So I remember end of the 90s, the sort of hottest business guru out there was Tom Peters. Do you remember Tom Peters,
sure.
right? In Search of Excellence and all of that stuff, empowerment, that was his term. So I got a chance to work with him 3 different times, and one time the topic was change management. So at a break, I went up to him and introduced myself and said, "Look, I get what you're saying and how to manage change." And I said, kind of the guys on that side of the room, they get it, but they can't do it. They were all government agencies and state agencies, and the bureaucratic nightmare that they had to live with does not adopt change easily. And I said the guys on the other side of the room were all corporations, usually large corporations, and, they'll get it done because heads will roll if it doesn't get done. I said, I'm in a different situation. I'm a franchisor, so I have to manage by arm's length. I can't go just rough arm or get somebody in a headlock and say, you will do this. And I can't fire them. So, help me here. And he was quiet for a minute. And then he said, then you need to select franchisees that embrace change. And he was right. And it changed my criteria of when we interviewed people. But the problem is legacy. All the people that were in the system already, I can't boot them out. So I always had to find ways of motivating people, showing them it was in their best interest to get on board with the new ideas.
So in reflection of your 120 plus franchisees,
Yes.
and then your experience today as an advisor, are there certain characteristics of a franchisee that kind of bubble to the top?
Yeah, there definitely is. I found that ex-military were terrific.
Wow.
Right? So once they committed to a system, they would make sure it got done. I remember my first was an ex-fighter pilot that had gone to work for Pan American flying 747s. Well, first of all, boy, you got to trust systems if you're going to be flying a 747. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of metal. How does that stay up in the sky? Well, he's committed to the system. And he did an incredible job in a small town in Northern California and built one of our largest volumes. And so I went out and started to try to find men and women that were ex-military and to get them into my system. So systems-oriented people were terrific. But on the other side of it, there's sort of a rule of thumb, if you will, in franchising: never, ever sell a franchise to an attorney, a doctor, or an engineer. And I broke all 3 of those and paid the price. And I won't go into the rationale behind each of the 3 because neither one of us want to get sued.
So let's flip back. So I have a bias in the classroom when I talk about franchising that you need a proven model, a successful small business that is in the multi-unit early stage before you can consider franchising. Yet, I come across franchise opportunities that appear to be like out of the box, that there's not a model in place other than the franchises themselves. Is my observation on target?
So I would say, and I'm not going to say you're on target or not, but I would say probably from my perspective, more realistically, when you sit in your chair and you've got your Titan Angel hat on, right?
The investor hat.
Yep,
Yeah.
The investor hat. You're looking for certain things, right? What's the problem? What's the solution? So if you've got an elegant solution to a big problem, that's a good start. Then the next thing is, how big is the marketplace, right? Great solution to a problem, but only 47 people out of 330 million people in America have it. That's probably not going to fly. So same thing, what's the market size? Is it replicable and expandable? The next thing is the business model. How do you make money? And is that going to be impacted by, regulatory agencies? Is it impacted from a competitive standpoint? All the other things, the way that you would look at a business to invest are the same benchmarks that are needed for a company to become a franchise. If those aren't there and in an optimum level, then you shouldn't franchise at all.
Got it. So I'm witnessing a phenomena, and it's probably been around for some time, but these are young people, 20-somethings. They're finishing school, and they're looking at the job market, and they're not finding a place for themselves. But maybe mom and dad have money, or better than that, grandpa and grandma do. And there's an option to consider being a young franchisee sponsored by a family member. Have you witnessed the same thing?
Very much so. So let's go back. Actually, when I was mentoring in your class in 462 for 3.5 years, at that time, the economy had tanked. We were in a recession or depression. You pick whatever title you want. The problem is people weren't getting jobs. We're getting out of college with an education, a degree, and debt, and there was a very small job market. And I was bringing people into my franchise then in their late 20s and early 30s. Think about recent graduates from Cal State Fullerton. I was doing that where when I had first started my franchise, about 50 years of age was my mean. People that had lost their job, they were middle management, couldn't get rehired because of age bias. And then year after year, that number got lower and lower to where 2008, 9, up to 11 when I sold my company, more and more young people in their 20s and 30s were coming into my system because they found they could use the education that they got to build something for themselves and their families. And yes, that's exactly what we saw. I still see it now because so many young people don't want to get into corporate, don't want to do that climb the ladder thing like you and I did, which was our path. It doesn't hold up now in these times. But being an entrepreneur, taking a chance, buying into a system that has the same kind of values, and that's the other thing. It is. You can go out and, get your degree and go join a company and then later find that you're creating a pesticide that's killing people. That doesn't sit well with the younger generation or anybody for that. So in franchising, you can research the company that you're getting involved with. What is their corporate footprint? Are they into social enterprise? Are they giving back to the community? And I think that's one of the things that I see, young people aligning themselves with franchises that stand for the same kind of cultural and social platforms that they believe in.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying there, and it's interesting. So the observation of I've seen many of my peers over the past 30 years who did that corporate exit you're talking about, often unanticipated or unwanted, and they're still got gas in the tank, and they want to do something, and they have a 401k which they could rob to set up a franchise. So, but that's maybe a dwindling crowd, or
No, it's still there, and I've worked with several lately. The same thing. In fact, at least a few years ago, the IRS woke up to the fact that people need to be much more self-directed in their IRAs, and there's a setup. Yeah, it costs you a few $1,000s to set it up and make it legal, but the IRS will let you use your own money and invest it into a business if you do it the right way.
Yeah, there you go.
Coming out of your retirement fund well before retirement age.
So if you were to offer advice to someone considering franchising a franchisor, or I'll flip it and say the franchisee as well, any simple things they should do? I mean, the ability to research is real.
Fantastic, yeah. It really is to get help. Don't go it alone. And, that was one of the reasons that I accepted the position with the California Bar Association on that advisory council for franchise and distribution laws, because it was creating a level of attorneys in California that were specialists. So, you go to your general practitioner when you have a cough, right, getting a cold or the flu or something. But would you let your GP, your general, regular, day in, day out doctor do open heart surgery or spinal surgery? No, you're going to go to a specialist. And that's what we're doing in that committee is creating a program. So out of 40,000 or more attorneys in California, there's now 54 that are certified franchise specialists. So you find one, you go see him, he or she, and spend an hour kind of getting the rules of the road and getting some kind of backup in place, where when you have something you want, you're passionate about, X, Y, Z, maybe it's pizza, and you find a pizza company that turns out the kind of product you like and has the kind of corporate culture that you can enjoy, take that franchise agreement to a specialist. That's what I would say. Don't let your neighbor who practices law, but maybe it's corporate law, reading and say, oh yeah, nothing's wrong with this. Well, there won't be anything wrong with it, because every franchise agreement, the federal disclosure documents have to be approved by the state. Especially here in California, we have the greatest protection laws here in California. In franchising, they say, so goes California, so goes the nation. So the rules that were created here in California to protect the consumer from being ripped off as they've propagated, and the feds are copying California. So if it's a California registered franchise, you're pretty safe that it's going to be an acceptable agreement. But that's only half of it. What if it's bad people running with a good agreement? So you go get help. At the very least, call me up and at the SBDC of Cal State Fullerton Irvine, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. It's what I do, and there's no charge. It's free. It's free to the citizens of America, the citizens of California. And if you're a Cal State Fullerton alum, makes it even better, because we're right on campus at the Irvine campus.
Yeah, very cool. And maybe running with that. So today, what are some of the other activities that you're involved in?
Well, I'm passionate about startups, as you know. So I'm the vice chairman at the Tech Coast Venture Network, TCVN, and twice a month we put on events for networking and education, introducing both startups, entrepreneurs to the vendors structure, suppliers to the startup industry, and investors. So that's a pretty good nexus, and it's a 34-year-old nonprofit organization.
And where do you meet? What time?
Oh, that's every other Tuesday, second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. And if tcvn.org always has the agenda, and it's a great place. And we currently, for the last year, have been meeting at Evo Nexus across from the Cove at UCI.
And it's in the evening?
Yes, it's 6:30 to 8:30.
Of course, when I've been
when you're teaching,
yeah.
exactly.
So I've never been able to come. but that's
So
terrific.
that's one thing that I'm passionate about. And of course, I'm a startup guy, so I'm involved with the startup. I've got 3 partners, and I'm running Nano Wellness Works. We've got a CBD infused beverage and a high performance non CBD beverage as well.
So tell me about that. The whole hemp, CBD, and cannabis space. I describe it as the Wild West.
Oh, very much so. Wild West on steroids, but now we're bringing another drug into it.
Yeah.
But no, it is quite exciting because of the benefits of the hemp plant. And mid-December last year, Congress passed a law, and the president signed it into law, the Farm Act of 2018, and in there was turning the hemp product from a Class 1 substance or drug to an agricultural crop. And if I can step back a bit, in 1939, just before World War II, there were 1.7 million acres of hemp being grown in the United States. In fact, there was more hemp being grown than tobacco at the time. And back then, everybody smoked. So that's a lot. In fact, the federal government promoted the growth of hemp because it's been used in clothing and rope and so many other products. In 1970, when the Reefer Madness, that movie came out, and the legislature that followed that year, the genetically hemp and cannabis are almost identical. The difference is the hemp extract and cannabinoid or CBD. The healthful part is very prevalent in hemp. What's not prevalent in hemp is the THC or the psychoactive. In fact, in law, if you could only have a hemp product that has less than 3% THC, and ours has none. So there's no psychoactive component in our products, only the healthful benefits.
I get it. So that's exciting. So your product is it's available online. Is it in retail stores now?
Yeah. So state of California has a bill floating through the assembly called AB 228, in which they will make CBD products legal to ingest. Right now in California, you can rub it. In fact, I use a CBD cream on my arthritic hands to take care of the pain. But you can't ingest it in California. You can in 14 other states, and we're selling in those states, other states, and just waiting for the law to get signed in the next hopefully few weeks here in California, and then it'll be everywhere. But yes, you can go to CBDwaterworks.com and order our product online, shipped here and out of Irvine.
Right, very cool. Anything else on the table that you're doing these days?
Yeah, trying to be a better father, husband, grandfather. Still run my own real estate property company. It lets me be a teacher because you don't make a living as a teacher. And I do teach entrepreneurship and innovation at Irvine Valley College, which has been a lot of fun. We have been enjoying that as well.
Well, terrific. It's been great having you today. If we can look into the future, it's 5 years from now, what would you like to say you're celebrating?
I'm celebrating the sale of my water company for a big, big number, and I've bought an island someplace. So I own a lot of real estate. I don't own an island. That's on my bucket list.
Okay, it's on my list too. So you've been most generous. How might our listeners? How might I help you?
Just by referring those who need help. Like I said, I'm at the SBDC. You can hit me at Michael.Sawitz, that's SAWITZ, at OCIE SBDC.com. That's a mouthful. But just go to the SBDC, and there's a lot of help there for entrepreneurs and startups and existing businesses. As long as you've got a volume under $5 million a year, we have services there gratis that are paid by the federal government for your use.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Michael. And for our listeners, thank you for joining in. Be sure to follow the Cal State Fullerton Center for Entrepreneurship on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and the same thing for me, John Bradley Jackson. Wanted to let you know that our guest next week at 1 p.m. on Tuesday is going to be intellectual patent attorney Justin Sanders. And he's going to speak on a number of topics specific to patents, but we can also talk about trademarks and copyright, etc. And if there are any particular questions you'd like me to ask Justin, go ahead and drop me an email at jjackson@fullerton.edu. And so with that, I want you all to have a good week, and we're going to catch up with you later. Take care.